There's something not quite right about this Mazda MX-5. It sounds louder, angrier.
That's because this Mazda MX-5 doesn't have a little 4-cylinder engine. This one's got a V6. Just listen to it.
It's the work of Rocketeer, a small company based in Hungerford. Rocketeer first squeezed a 3-litre V6 beneath the bonnet of a Mark 1 MX-5 3 years ago. Now it's a growing business offering conversions for Mark 1 and Mark 2 models. You can either buy the engine on its own to fit yourself, pay Rocketeer to build a turnkey car for you, or go the full restomod route, where the possibilities are endless. The engine is a Jaguar AJ30. It's a 60-degree V6 with over-square pistons, which means it revs beautifully. As you probably heard, this is no lazy, laborious V6. The Jaguar is related to the Ford Duratec V6, but with variable valve timing. This motor is a real gem. It was originally conceived by Porsche, later had input from Cosworth, and if you strap two of the Ford versions together, you get a 5.9-litre Aston Martin V12. It develops 270 horsepower at 7,000 RPM and 225 pound-foot of torque. Best of all, the engine is aluminium, whereas the standard Mazda 4-pot is cast iron. That means this much bigger, much more powerful motor is no heavier. The standard MX-5 gearboxes, both 5 and 6-speed, are said to be plenty strong enough as they are.
Yeah, this V6, it's properly wonderful. It's a joyful thing. The soundtrack is to die for. Let's talk about that first. At lower speeds, when you just tip the throttle open a little bit, there's a kind of bassy tone to it. It sounds quite fruity down there. And then you flatten the accelerator, let it rev all the way out, and my God, it sounds so much sharper and so much more raw than I was expecting. It really is incredible. It goes right through you. There's this zingy, almost tinny kind of quality to it, and it just sounds razor sharp. Honestly, it has the kind of intensity right at the top end of a racing engine. It's fantastic. When you hear Jaguar V6, you think lazy and torquey, don't you? You don't think powerful, zingy and really revvy. But that's exactly what this engine is. I can't believe it ever found its way underneath the bonnet of a Jaguar saloon car. That's the soundtrack. What about the character of the engine? It's so rev hungry. There is good torque through the mid-range, but it's not an engine that you drive on the torque, short shifting to get back into the torque. You drive it on the power. It spins beyond 7,000 RPM. And it keeps pulling all the way to the red line. It just doesn't fade. It's so energetic. It's so free revving. It's so responsive. And the power is really, really good. It makes this car properly quick. But only if you really chase those revs. You have to get down the gears, chase the red line, and then it's a properly quick car. The standard 6-speed manual gearbox, I mean, they're really good as they are. It's got a lovely, short, quick, direct throw, really mechanical, lovely weight to it. Yeah. Wouldn't change the gear shift at all. The gearing is properly short, so you really punch through the ratios. That might become a bit tiresome on the motorway when it's buzzing away. But when you're having a blast, I love it.
This Mark 2.5 car is the ideal basis for a Rocketeer conversion. It has a stiffer body shell, an LSD and a 6-speed box. Rocketeer's demonstrator also has uprated Fox dampers and Brembo brakes. Otherwise though, the chassis is exactly how it left the factory a couple of decades ago.
Crucially, the chassis feels like it can handle all this extra power and torque. It's not overwhelmed by it at all, not even close. Actually, it feels like it was designed for this level of power and torque. Steering, ride, handling, all of that will be absolutely familiar to anyone who's got an early Mazda MX-5. So the car feels really light. It is really light. It feels beautifully balanced. As I've said, with this V6 engine, the car is no heavier. The weight distribution is pretty much exactly as it was. The car feels really compact, so you can thread it down a narrow road with such confidence. There's a good amount of body roll in corners, typical MX-5 style, so you feel the grip down the side of the car, and the car feels alive. It's not like a normal sports car that can just be clamped flat. This one's expressive. The steering is pin sharp. It's also communicative. It's so natural. That's the key word for the steering in this car. You just position it exactly where you want it. No second guessing. I think if this was my car, there are a couple of things I'd want to work on. I'd want to see if we can make the structure a bit more rigid, because it does flex, it does rattle over bumps as well. You can feel that it's an older roadster. I'd also want to see if we could settle the ride quality a little bit. The ride is actually comfortable, it's fluid, it's pliant, but over a bumpy road it can get quite choppy and fidgety. I'd want to see if I could just iron that out a little bit. But generally, the way this thing handles, it's so sweet and playful as well, interactive, like a proper sports car, the way a two-seat rear-wheel drive roadster should feel. You have to remember with this car that at the heart of it is a little Japanese roadster that's 20, maybe 30 years old, and that can be bought for a couple of £1,000s. And in certain ways, it really does feel its age, for better and for worse. For better, because it's so compact, it's so light, it's so agile and fun to drive. And for worse, because the structure does flex, it does shudder. The interior plastics, they're all rock hard, they feel dated. The point being, this Rocketeer MX-5 still feels exactly like an early MX-5. That means it's brilliant to drive. This one just happens to have the most amazing V6 engine in it, with stacks of power and an incredible soundtrack. After all that, you probably want to know how much a Rocketeer MX-5 costs. Well, they'll sell you the engine in kit form for you to put into your own car for only a few £1,000s. A turnkey car built by them, ready to go, starts at £12,500. I'm told you could have a car exactly like this one with its handful of upgrades for £15,000. That includes the donor car itself. £15,000 for all this seems really good to me. If you want to, you can spend much, much more than £15,000. For instance, let's say you want a fully restored shell, the chassis completely overhauled, you want the interior retrimmed. You could spend a small fortune. One or two Rocketeer customers have already spent £70,000 on their MX-5s. I think this is much more than just an MX-5 with a V6 engine dropped into it. I think this is a small, affordable slice of the restomod scene. I would love to have hundreds of thousands of pounds to spend on an Alphaholics or on a Singer, but I don't. However, I could afford a Rocketeer MX-5, and I think that's what I like about this car most of all.
Thank you for watching this PistonHeads video. Please remember to subscribe to our channel and head over to PistonHeads.com.